On the morning of April 1st, 2024, an Israeli airstrike obliterated the Iranian consulate annex in Damascus, killing 7 Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps officers, including 2 generals. Within 2 weeks, Iran launched over 300 drones and ballistic missiles at Israeli territory. That sequence, on its surface, looks like escalation. But here is what the mainstream analysis missed entirely. Iran did not scramble. Iran did not improvise. The strike against its officers did not interrupt a military command structure. It activated one. The assumption embedded in virtually every Western security briefing that killing Iranian leadership degrades Iranian capability has been proven wrong, repeatedly, at cost, and the price of that misunderstanding is still being paid. The Islamic Republic does not fight like a conventional state. It was never designed to. And the architecture it built over 4 decades was specifically engineered to survive exactly the kind of decapitation strategy that Washington and Tel Aviv have spent billions attempting to execute. For years, the prevailing narrative inside Western policy circles ran something like this. Iran is a brittle theocracy propped up by a single revolutionary institution, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And that institution is held together by a small circle of indispensable commanders. Remove those commanders, the logic went, and the machine stops. This framing was not fringe analysis. It was the operational premise behind targeted killing campaigns that stretched from the mountains of Iraq to the streets of Tehran. When the United States executed Major General Qasem Soleimani at Baghdad International Airport in January 2020, senior officials described the operation in terms that suggested a fatal blow to Iran's regional network. The Secretary of State at the time called it a decapitation that would deter aggression. Defense analysts on major cable networks spent the following 72 hours speculating about internal power struggles, succession crises, and the inevitable contraction of Iranian influence across the Levant and Mesopotamia. What followed told a different story. Within 18 months of Soleimani's death, rocket attacks on U.S. positions in Iraq had not decreased. They had increased in sophistication and frequency. The Houthi movement in Yemen, which Soleimani had helped coordinate, did not fragment. It expanded its missile range to include targets in the United Arab Emirates, firing ballistic projectiles into Abu Dhabi for the first time in the conflict's history. Hezbollah in Lebanon maintained its arsenal, which by 2023 independent assessments placed at approximately 150,000 rockets and precision-guided munitions. The Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq continued receiving Iranian weapons shipments. The command had transferred. The network had not flinched. The numbers themselves contradict the decapitation theory. Between 2020 and 2024, the United States, Israel, and allied intelligence services killed or neutralized more than a dozen senior IRGC figures and affiliated militia commanders. The name Mohammad Reza Zahedi, killed in Damascus in April 2024, joins a list that includes figures killed in Beirut, Baghdad, Mosul, and Tehran itself. And yet during that same period, Iranian-aligned forces fired on U.S. positions in Syria and Iraq more than 165 times between October 2023 and early 2024 alone. The killing of leaders did not slow the operational tempo. It barely interrupted it. That paradox demands an explanation, and the explanation lives in the structure itself. To understand how Iran fights while losing its generals, you have to understand what the IRGC actually is, not as a military organization, but as a doctrine made flesh. The Revolutionary Guard was not built as a conventional army designed to hold territory and project power through centralized command. It was built as an ideological organism designed to survive the death of any single node. Its architects, drawing on the experience of revolutionary guerrilla movements and informed by the brutal lessons of the 1980 to 1988 Iran-Iraq War, embedded redundancy into the institution at every level. The Quds Force, the IRGC's external operations branch, does not operate like a Western Special Operations Command, where authority flows downward from a single directorate. It operates through a franchise model, where regional commanders maintain independent relationships with proxy forces, independent weapons pipelines, and independent financial networks. The Houthis, formerly Ansar Allah, receive Shahab derivative ballistic missiles and components for Iranian Shahed 136 loitering munitions, but the technical knowledge to assemble and fire those weapons has been transferred to Yemeni operators. When the IRGC officer overseeing that relationship dies, the relationship does not die. The Yemeni operators know what they know. The weapons already in country remain in country. What changes is logistics coordination at the margin. What does not change is capability on the ground. The same principle applies to Hezbollah, whose engineering units have spent years learning to manufacture their own precision guidance kits from components smuggled through a network that runs from Iranian factories through Iraqi airfields to Syrian highways and into the Bekaa Valley. Those guidance kits do not disappear when a general is killed in Damascus. They multiply because the knowledge has already been distributed. This distributed architecture is not accidental. It is the direct strategic response to a very specific threat environment that Iran identified in the 1990s and methodically designed against. Israeli intelligence, working through Unit 8200 and its human intelligence networks, had demonstrated the ability to penetrate Iranian-aligned organizations. American signals intelligence had shown the capacity to locate and track senior commanders. Iran's answer was not to hide its leaders more effectively. Its answer was to make its leaders strategically non-essential to day-to-day operations. The Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei approved a reorganization of the Quds Force following the Second Lebanon War in 2006, which itself demonstrated both the power and the vulnerability of highly centralized proxy command. The reorganization pushed operational authority downward and outward. By the time Soleimani was killed 14 years later, he was the most famous man in that system. But he was not, in operational terms, the most necessary one. The weapons themselves underscore this point. The Shahed 136, the delta-wing loitering munition that became synonymous with the war in Ukraine after Iran supplied them to Russia in 2022 and 2023, is not a technologically sophisticated platform. It is deliberately simple. It uses a commercially available engine derived from a Czech design, navigates via GPS and inertial systems, and can be assembled by trained technicians in field conditions. Iran exported not just the drone, but the doctrine of its use: saturation attack, accepting a high interception rate in exchange for the cost asymmetry between a $50,000 munition and the multi-million-dollar interceptor missile required to destroy it. That doctrine is now embedded in Houthi operations in the Red Sea, where the cost calculus has forced the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and its battle group to expend SM-2 and SM-6 interceptors at a rate that the Congressional Budget Office estimated was straining Navy munitions stockpiles at a pace not seen since the Gulf War. One battle group burning through inventory at that rate is a logistics problem. Scale that to a full regional war, and it becomes a strategic constraint. Hezbollah's precision missile threat represents the most severe military capability Iran has built through the proxy model. The organization possesses, by the 2023 Israeli Military Intelligence Assessment, approximately 2,000 precision-guided missiles, capable of striking within 10 meters of a designated target at ranges covering all of northern Israel and parts of central Israel. These are not Katyusha rockets fired in salvos. These are weapons capable of targeting the Rafael Advanced Defense Systems plant near Haifa, the Kiryat military headquarters in Tel Aviv, and the Dimona nuclear facility in the Negev. The development of this capability required years of IRGC engineering support, the smuggling of guidance components through a network that traversed Syria and was repeatedly struck by Israeli air interdiction. And yet the capability grew anyway. Because even when individual shipments were destroyed, the accumulated knowledge and prepositioned stockpiles continued to compound. The historical parallel that best illuminates Iran's strategy is not, as commentators frequently suggest, the Soviet Cold War model of proxy competition. It is closer to the strategy of the Vietnamese National Liberation Front, which American planners also consistently misread as a centralized hierarchy vulnerable to leadership attrition. The Phoenix Program, the CIA-run effort to systematically neutralize NLF political and military infrastructure during the Vietnam War, killed or captured an estimated 20,000 cadres between 1968 and 1972. The NLF did not collapse. It adapted, pushed authority further down, and ultimately outlasted the political will of the power conducting the attrition campaign. Iran observed that history and internalized it as doctrine. The domino effects of this misread are visible in every theater where Iranian-aligned forces operate. In Iraq, the persistent U.S. assumption that killing IRGC-linked PMF commanders would reduce militia activity led to a series of strikes in late 2023 and early 2024 that instead accelerated the political push to expel American forces entirely. The Iraqi parliament, dominated by parties with deep PMF ties, formally voted to demand U.S. troop withdrawal in January 2024. The strikes intended to degrade Iranian influence in Iraq may have done more to legitimize it than any amount of Iranian investment could have achieved alone. In Syria, Israeli air interdiction of Iranian weapons shipments has been ongoing since 2013, with hundreds of strikes documented, and yet the IRGC footprint in Syria has not been eliminated. It has been redistributed, with supply routes shifting from highway corridors to smaller, more frequent movements using civilian infrastructure that carries a higher political cost to strike. What you are watching, in aggregate, is not a series of disconnected military episodes. It is the operational performance of a system designed around one central insight, that asymmetric actors who make themselves structurally resilient can defeat operationally superior adversaries by simply refusing to conform to the timeline those adversaries expect. The consequences of this strategic reality extend far beyond the immediate battlefield, and they compound across systems that most military analysis treats as separate. Begin with energy markets. The Strait of Hormuz remains the transit point for approximately 20% of the world's oil supply and 17% of liquefied natural gas. Iran does not need to close the strait to affect oil prices. It needs only to credibly threaten interdiction, which the possession of the Noor anti-ship missile, a derivative of the Chinese C-802, and a fleet of fast attack craft and submarine-launched mines provides. During periods of heightened regional tension in late 2023 and early 2024, Brent crude futures spiked by 11% in 2 weeks, driven entirely by Houthi attacks in the Red Sea and the perceived risk of Iranian escalation. That 11% translates to roughly $40 billion in added global energy costs per month, borne disproportionately by Asian importing nations, particularly India, Japan, South Korea, and China, which creates diplomatic pressure those governments apply, not in Tehran, but in Washington. That pressure reshapes alliance geometry in ways American planners consistently underestimate. Japan and South Korea cannot afford to align with a sanctions regime that raises their energy import costs indefinitely. India, which has structured its energy import strategy around discounted Iranian crude purchased through UAE-based intermediaries, has a structural economic incentive that runs directly counter to American maximum pressure policy. China's position is more explicit. It signed a 25-year strategic cooperation agreement with Iran in 2021, valued at $400 billion across energy, infrastructure, and military technology sectors. Each time American or Israeli operations kill Iranian commanders and trigger regional escalation, they reinforce China's argument to the global South that U.S. security guarantees come attached to economic costs that smaller economies cannot absorb. Inside American domestic politics, the Iran file has produced a paradox that neither party has successfully resolved. Hawkish positions that call for more aggressive targeting of IRGC infrastructure appeal to a base that wants strength, but produce the exact strategic outcome Iran's doctrine is designed to exploit: escalation cycles that drain U.S. resources, strain alliance relationships, and generate domestic political pressure against extended foreign entanglements. Dovish positions that seek diplomatic re-engagement with Tehran face the structural problem that Iran's network of proxy capabilities is now so embedded and so regionally powerful that dismantling it in exchange for any conceivable diplomatic concession would require Iran to voluntarily eliminate decades of strategic investment. No political leadership in Tehran, reformist or hardline, has ever proposed that trade. The global power balance implication is the most significant and the least discussed. If a mid-sized regional power with an economy under sustained sanctions pressure can construct a military architecture that defeats the world's most sophisticated targeted killing programs, absorbs the assassination of its most prominent general, and continues expanding its regional reach, the demonstration effect for every other state that perceives itself as an American adversary is impossible to overstate. North Korea's nuclear weapons program accelerated following Soleimani's killing. Russia's willingness to purchase Iranian drones for use in Ukraine represents a reversal of the arms flow that defined the Cold War. A sanctioned middle power is now arming a permanent UN Security Council member. Venezuela and Nicaragua have deepened security consultations with Tehran. The template is being studied and replicated. What Iran has built over 4 decades is not merely a regional influence network. It is a proof of concept. It is the operational demonstration that a state without air superiority, without a blue water navy, without the ability to confront American or Israeli conventional forces directly, can nonetheless achieve strategic parity through distributed lethality, proxy depth, and structural resilience. The system does not require its architects to survive. Qasem Soleimani is dead. His network is larger than it was the day he was killed. Mohammad Reza Zahedi is dead. The precision missiles his organization helped deliver are still pointed at targets across the Middle East. The leaders are variable. The institution is the constant. And that institution, built under sanctions, under air attack, under the sustained pressure of the most capable intelligence services on Earth, has proven something that American strategy has not yet fully absorbed. that you can lose every individual battle and still be winning the structural war. The generals are replaceable because the system was designed to replace them. The weapons are reproducible because the doctrine transferred before the weapons arrived. The network is resilient because its resilience was the point. The conventional assumption has always been that Iran is playing for time, waiting for a moment of leverage, a diplomatic opening, a shift in American domestic politics. The more uncomfortable interpretation, supported by the evidence accumulated across 2 decades of targeted killing campaigns and the undiminished capability they failed to erode, is that Iran is not waiting for anything. It already built what it came to build. The question for Washington and Jerusalem is no longer how to dismantle that structure. It is whether they have finally recognized what they are dealing with, and whether that recognition came soon enough to matter. Subscribe to the Proxy Signal. We'll be here when the next development breaks.